Hey fam, happy hump day. I want to come on here to do my full review of the book Flesh and Blood. I did a little prequel to this. I read like the first page and a half. This book is by Allison Hobbs. It's presented by Zane. So basically, the little tidbit that I read, basically, it was a very hot and heavy sex scene that at the very beginning of the book, which sort of sucked you in. And that scene takes place between Malik and his fiance Elle. Okay, so they're engaged, and when they're finished having sex, basically Malik tells Elle, "I love you," and she says it back to him. However, he can hear the hesitation in her voice because he is an ex-heroin addict, and she's gone through the ringer with him. And I do mean everything from stealing money from her, losing a job, cheating on her with multiple women, because that's what comes with being a heroin addict. So she's been through it with him, and it's like a hesitation to love you like that, basically, you hear from her. But anyway, she falls asleep, and he can't seem to. He actually is up, and for the first time in a long time, he's having a craving for some heroin. So he gets himself dressed, and he gets $80 off the dresser, and him and Elle have both been working, saving money in an account for their wedding. They've saved like $10,000, and he decides that he's going to use that money to go get a hit. He probably needs more than the $80 that he has. He promises himself, "I'll only spend like $100 and I'll put it back. She won't even notice that it's gone." So he leaves and he spirals, basically. He goes and gets a hit and meets some women, and they end up in some abandoned apartment, hotel, whatever, and they're there for days. Getting high, having sex, getting drunk, and he's providing all the money for the party, so it's going down. So he wakes up days later in the hospital where he is OD'd, and Elle is at his bedside, but she's sleeping. She's been there so long, and the doctor tells him basically that you almost died. You came really close to death. And when Elle wakes up, she's very happy to see that he's okay, but she's also completely done. Like, she cannot do this at all anymore. The good thing here, if you want to call it that, is that she realized what he was doing with the card, and a day or two into it, she canceled the card out so he couldn't use it. So he only cut into a couple $1,000s instead of the full 10,000. I'm making sure I'm still recording. I've had problems, sorry. Anyway, she tells him she's putting him out also. Not to mention the fact that he's been working with her father, who got him a job after the last one that he lost from his addiction. So now he's lost that job, so he's homeless and he's jobless, and he's having to, as a grown man who's educated, successful, having to move back into his parents in his late 20s. So while he's there, he's putting a huge strain on his parents' marriage by being there, and he slowly started stealing things of theirs to go get hits, to keep getting high. And then he realizes he can't stay there anymore, that he needs to leave to give his parents a peace of mind. So he ends up stealing some of his mother's jewelry, and he goes to a pawn shop where he pawns it at, and he literally bumps into another addict, and they go buy some drugs together, and they end up in a hotel room, which he's paying for, and they're getting high. And he wakes up the next morning, and she is gone with his money and his drugs. But she ends up coming back a couple hours later with more money and more drugs. She figured out a way to make a come up off of what he did have, and she did so. But ultimately, they end up getting robbed by people who she owed money to, who followed her to the hotel room. Crazy story. Okay, so anyway, they decide, because her dog died, the people killed her dog that was there with them, and they decide, or she decides, they need to give the dog a proper burial. So they go to Home Depot to get a shovel. He waits in the car. She goes inside. She ends up trying to rob Home Depot with said shovel. Anyway, she gets caught. The cops come, they arrest her, and they find him out in the car. So of course they arrest him too as an accessory. So he goes to court. He's sentenced to 5 years for this robbery, and he's starting to do his time. And about 7 to 8 months into his sentence, Elle shows up there, and he's so excited. He can't believe she's come to visit him. And as she's walking towards him, he's freaked out because she is noticeably pregnant. And he's immediately excited, like, oh my gosh, is that my baby? Is that my baby? And she's like, of course, yes, it's your baby. Hello. And he's like excited. Oh, is it a boy or a girl? What are we going to name him? He's starting to get into dad mode. And she's like, hold on a second. I'm here because I'm with Everett, who is a former boss of hers when she was with Malik. And Malik knew about the boss and swore that he had some kind of attraction to Elle. And apparently he was right, because now Elle's with him. Anyway, she says she's going to marry Everett, and she wants Malik to sign over parental rights because Everett wants to adopt the child, give him his last name, and raise him as his own. And Malik is furious. He can't believe Elle finally showed up after all this time to tell him this shit. And he's cussing at her, going off, and she's standing up to walk away, and she's like, you know I'm right. Your child deserves a father. You have a 5-6 year sentence, and you're not going to be there. So he leaves, goes to a cell, and even though he's pissed off, the one thing he does have is plenty of time. And while he's sitting there thinking about it, he determines she's correct. He wants his kid to have a father there for him, so he does the selfless thing that he can do best for his child, and he signs over parental rights. And he doesn't tell his parents about the child because they wouldn't be able to see the child either. So his 6 year stretch goes by, 5 years, I don't know, 5 years, I think. And he gets out of jail, and he goes to stay back with his parents, and he looks up Elle online, where he finds she does lots of posts about his son, pictures. He's able to figure out where she lives and her routine. So he's following when they go to the park. He's looking at his son. He wants to see his son, but ultimately he really wants to snatch him up and take him because that's his kid. And Elle actually sees him one time when they're out, and you can tell she's completely uncomfortable, and he's afraid she'll call the cops on him. So he decides he's going to move. Now, they live in Philadelphia. When he was locked up in prison, he met a friend in there who said that his uncle had a construction company in Phoenix, Arizona, and that he could immediately get him a job doing construction out there. So Malik decides that's the best thing for him to do. So he moves to Phoenix, and he starts working for his friend's uncle, and he's doing construction, which is kicking his ass because it is in Phoenix, Arizona. Hello, hot as hell, and he can't keep up with it. Anyway, while he's there, he's going to AA meetings because he's trying to keep up with his sobriety. He meets a guy there who's like his friend, and this guy has his own company. He works in IT, which is Malik's old field. He has his own company where they go into businesses and they update, keep track of, and fix machines that collect data for the companies. And Malik actually ends up reaching out to him, explaining, I can't keep this up with the construction job. And his friend's like, are you good with computers? And he's like, yes, that's what my education is in. So he ends up working with his friend. And through his job, he actually meets this beautiful woman here. This one here. Sasha, okay? Sasha is a dentist. She has her own practice, which is where they do their work on her data there in the computer systems. He befriends her. They start seeing each other. Sasha is a single mother. She has a baby girl named Zoe who's like 3-4 months old. And they all end up becoming really close. And Malik actually ends up taking her and Zoe to meet his parents. And his parents are actually not shy about not showing how happy they are that this little girl is not his. And him and Sasha decide they're really not going to be going back there with Zoe because they don't want their daughter picking up on the fact that grandma and grandpa aren't really too much into you. So they end up getting married, and he adopts Zoe as his own, gives her his last name. He's finally able to be there like that for a child. So 9 years go by. That's where it skips to. And he's taking his family on their first real family vacation they've had a chance to go to. And while they're on this vacation, he gets a phone call from Elle, who tells him that his son Phoenix, who is now 13 years old, is in the hospital. And he's freaking out like, oh my gosh, why? What happened? And she tells him Phoenix started noticing that he doesn't look like his father. And he started asking questions and pressing. And she was like, that is your real father. She lied. And Phoenix is not stupid. He's a very intelligent young man, and he's smart. So he secretly sends off DNA for himself and Everett, has it tested, and finds out that Everett is not his father. So he is furious, and he comes at Elle with that, and he presses her, and she ends up admitting about Malik being his father, about Malik being on heroin, getting locked up in prison, and she doesn't know where he is or how he is now. She had to reach out to his parents basically to get the number to reach him now. Basically, Phoenix starts getting into trouble, acting a fool, and he ends up going out on the street and buying heroin himself and bringing it home and shooting up in his bed and passing out. And his mom, of course, finds him, freaks out, calls the ambulance. He's OD'd on heroin himself. And Phoenix explains, I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was trying to hurt my mom the way she hurt me for lying about who my father is. And Elle is calling him because Phoenix wants to meet him, and she's asking him to come to Philadelphia now, which of course he agrees to. He wants to help in any way he can. So he literally leaves his family on this vacation and flies out to Philadelphia. And when he gets there, he meets his son. Of course, it's a little awkward at first, but they end up, sort of getting to know each other. They all end up doing a little therapy with a therapist there and getting to know each other better in a healthy way, basically. And they decide, the three of them, that in the summertime, which is not too far off, Phoenix will come to stay with Malik and his family for at least 1 week. And from there, Malik goes home and he tells Sasha, of course, who already knows his whole background. They don't lie to each other. He tells her everything. And they finally tell Zoe she has a brother, and she's very excited because she had no idea. Anyway, summertime comes, and they end up going to pick up Phoenix at the airport. And they're in the car driving home, and it's a little awkward, but everyone's happy. It's like a feel-good kind of moment, but awkward a little bit. I'm making sure I'm still recording. I've had problems. Anyway, so they're driving home, and when they get to their street, there's a boy who's across the street out front working on bikes. He has them in the garage area, and Zoe explains to him that's Baxter, and he gets bullied. His dad's like hardly ever home because he works. He has to travel a lot, so he's always home with his mom. He just seems like a withdrawn, shy kind of kid because of this. And Phoenix seems like concerned about that. So like right after he gets in the house and sets himself up and, takes a tour of the house, he's like, I'm going to go down the street and make my first friend. So he goes and befriends Baxter. And after that, it's like they're inseparable. They're always together. Phoenix goes with Baxter and his mom on outings, and they take Baxter with them sometimes, and it's a mutual back and forth thing. And Malik notices sometimes that Phoenix is a little bossy towards Baxter, and he checks him on that, basically, like that's not a good way to be a friend. And then one day, Phoenix comes home with a bike. Now, these bikes that Baxter works on, he does a cold-blooded, expensive job. Gold chains, the loped out rides, like the essays roads. You know the kinds we all wanted when we was little? That's what he does to bikes. He fixes them up like that. Well, Phoenix comes home with one day, and Malik notices it, and he makes mental note, I need to take him to buy his own bike. That way he's not borrowing. But shortly after that, like the day after that, Malik wakes up in the morning and Phoenix is gone, and he's asking Zoe, do you know where he went? He's like, yeah, he went with his friends on the bike. And then the next thing you know, Baxter is knocking on the door asking for Phoenix, and he's like, well, he's not here. And he's shocked because he thought Phoenix would have been with Baxter, but apparently he's made other friends in the neighborhood, and that's who he's gone off with. And Baxter's kind of thrown off because he's like, well, he told me to come over here this morning. Have him call me when he gets home. So apparently, Phoenix is now hanging out with all the boys who have been bullying Baxter. It's like crazy. He's peeping all this, and of course Zoe knows the 411. She's telling Dad. And when he comes home, he brings his friends with him to introduce him to his mom, or to Sasha, and to his dad. And they all go out in the backyard and they're playing around. And this house that they live in is a very nice upscale house, upscale neighborhood. They're having a pool built in the backyard, and the boys are out there goofing off. And then Malik is in the house watching from the window, and he sees Phoenix go off towards his phone. His phone has gone off, so he's going to answer it. And he opens it up, and he starts cracking up, and then all his friends are like simultaneously getting the same message, and they're opening it up, and they're all cracking up too. But the way they're looking at the message they're getting is off. It's a little off, and he's thinking there's some kind of sexual orientation going on with that little message there. So he's peeping, he's paying attention. and he's going to talk to Malik about it later. So that night, he goes into Phoenix's room to talk to him about it, and Phoenix has fell asleep with the headset on, and he realizes that his phone is right there. So he picks the phone up and he uses Phoenix's finger to unlock it, and he goes to the text messages because he's trying to figure out what's going on. And the text message between Phoenix and Baxter goes a little something like this. Where were you today? I was looking for you. You told me to come over. Like, what's going on? He's like, I'm out with my friends. Why are you tripping? And he's like, why are you being like that? Fine then. Bring me my bike back. And he's like, no, I'm not going to give you your bike back. Matter of fact, if you say anything, I'm going to send this video that I have to everybody. And then Phoenix goes and looks at the video, and there's a video on the phone of Baxter in his house. Well, we assume it's his house. He's on his knees, and he is giving oral sex to some guy. You can't see the guy's, midsection up, but you can see him giving oral to a guy. And Malik is freaked out, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't wake him up and what the hell's going on? It's like he wants to be a good parent, but he's protective at the same time because they don't know his son, and he doesn't want Sasha sort of Xing out his son before he gets a chance to have a relationship with him. So anyway, the next day he does end up asking Phoenix about it, and Phoenix explains, I was just joking with him. It was nothing seriously, and Malik is not stupid. Those are serious words, and what the hell's up with the video? Like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it was nothing. I've already deleted it. He said, actually, you deleted it. I saw you were in my phone deleting text messages and this and that. And Malik sort of doesn't know what to make of all this, but he is not stupid, okay? He's hip to what's going on here. He just doesn't know exactly how far it's gone. So anyway, he goes out front because he jogs normally every day, Malik does. And when he steps outside, he sees across the street in front of Baxter's house, there's an ambulance. And Baxter's mom steps out, and the paramedics have Baxter on a stretcher, and they're taking him to the hospital. So he runs over, trying to make sure everything's okay. And they take Baxter to the hospital, and he's asking Baxter's mom, like, what's going on? What happened? And he's like, he slit his wrist. He tried to kill himself. And he's immediately like, oh my gosh, I wonder if it has something to do with that video and the text messages. Duh. I mean, he knows, but he ain't trying to. Anyway, he ends up taking Baxter's mom to the hospital, dropping her off, letting her know if you need anything, contact me. I'm here for you. He goes back home. Baxter ends up being okay. He goes home, and shortly after that, Baxter ends up coming home, and it's like a couple days later, there's a U-Haul out in front of their house. And Malik notices it in the morning, when he's running, and he walks over and talks to Baxter, who's alone, carrying a box out to the U-Haul, and he actually asks him about that video of him, and Baxter is frozen, and he's embarrassed, and he's like, oh my gosh, you saw that? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I really hope that my son didn't have anything to do with what you did and why you guys are moving. And he's like, no, we just needed to move. We needed a fresh start after everything that's been going on. So they leave basically, and that's the end of Baxter. And Baxter did take his bike with him. All right, so after that, shortly after that, it's Halloween. Oh, I'm sorry. After that, Phoenix ends up going back home. Now, after he's home for a couple months, he ends up getting into trouble. He's causing problems, being disrespectful. And Elle ends up calling Malik, saying, I want Phoenix to come live with you permanently. And he's like, well, I got to talk to Sasha, but okay. He's like, I think I can handle this. So they do end up taking him on, bringing him to the house. He moves in with them. And then shortly after that, it is Halloween. And now, mind you, during all this time, Malik has been watching Phoenix like a hawk because he doesn't trust him with what happened with Baxter, and he doesn't understand why he's been getting into trouble at home. So basically, Halloween shoots up, and Malik takes his daughter trick-or-treating. Zoe, he's taking her trick-or-treating, and Phoenix is riding around the neighborhood on his own bike with his friends, and at the end of the night, everyone goes home, and Malik wakes up because he can't sleep, and there's an Amber Alert on the news about a little girl who they happened to see earlier that evening. She was in a Wonder Woman costume. She's gone missing, and it's literally like 2 houses over from where they live, and it's definitely out of the area. It's out of the norm for the area that they live in because, like I said, it's a high scale area, nice houses. This is not a normal thing. So after that, they're all putting in time, volunteering, helping to look for this little girl in the neighborhood. And during one of the nights that Malik is volunteering helping, he ends up going back to his shed at his house because he's looking for a flashlight, you know, so he could look at night. And he's up in the shed area looking, and he stumbles across a little girl's red boot. It's in his shed, and he's freaking out like he doesn't know what to do. So what does this fool do? I told you they're having a pool built in their backyard. Well, the next day they're supposed to have the concrete laid for this pool. So he digs a hole in the pool and puts the boot in there to hide it. Okay? So when he does get a chance to speak to Phoenix, he's like, what the hell is going on? I fell out little girl's boot in our backyard and blah, 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 in the shed. And he's like, I'm sorry. I found it when we were looking and I didn't want to turn it in because I thought they would think I had something to do with it because I'm black. And this is a white neighborhood. And it just sounds like some bullshit. I don't even know what else to say. And he knows it too. So he does nothing, okay? He does nothing. And the cops end up arresting this guy that lives in the area who is a child molester. He's been in jail for it before, and he's out. They end up arresting him, and while they have him in custody, they also find footage of him at the time of the abduction, basically, somewhere. So he's video, you know, taped. He has an alibi. So they end up letting him go. Okay, so I told you that Malik has been following Phoenix because he doesn't trust him, basically. And basically he ends up having to rent a car because Phoenix is not stupid. He's hip. He sees Dad here and there following him. So Malik gets a rental car and he follows him. And one of the places that Malik goes to is his friend's grandfather owns a farm. And he has gone there plenty of times, rode horses. And Malik follows him out there, and he ends up having to like scour the land looking for Phoenix, and he ends up finding him in a cave. And when he gets in there, his son is sitting on the ground holding that dead little girl's body. He's like rubbing her head like a pet or something. I don't know. And he is freaked out, throwing up. What the fuck is going on here? And he's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, I'm sorry, I had to do it, Dad. I had to. I just needed to. And he's like, oh my God, he's freaking out. So what does he do? He takes the body, puts it in the car, and they go drop it in a cornfield to hide it. I mean, it'll be found probably within a couple days. But he takes it and hides it. And he's questioning his son, like, why do you do this? And he's like, I've always had this urge to do this. I just needed to. He's a sick little fuck. And Malik is so ignorant. He's really thinking, maybe you got this from me. I've always had this urge for drugs and to get high. And it took everything in me to stop it. And he's like, that's it, Dad. It's just a bunch of ridiculousness here that's going on. But basically, what he decides is that I need to let him get this out of him. I'm going to find a way for him to get this out of him. So a couple days later, the cops find the little girl. They end up not finding the killer for her. And Malik has gone online and figured out where this guy is that they had originally arrested, who is a child molester. And he's like, that's who will do. So he ends up approaching this guy, pretending to be a reporter, and offering him money basically for his story. He's like, I want to tell your side of the story. Because this guy, of course, he's shunned by the neighborhood. He lost his job because of being arrested. Like, he's here for the picking. And of course, he wants to get his story out there, but Malik has offered him $500 to give him the stories, and he desperately needs it. So he ends up picking the guy up in the car, and the guy has asked for beer, so he purchased him a 6-pack of beer in bottles. And he has his son Phoenix sitting in the back seat, who he's claiming is like a junior person who's doing an internship at the paper that he works at. Anyway, he's doing the interview, recording the conversation, and the guy's drinking the bottles of beer, and Phoenix is in the back seat. The guy actually offers Phoenix 13-year-old ass a bottle of beer. And Malik's like, go ahead, whatever. So Phoenix takes the bottle because he thinks I can knock him out with this. Their plan is to kill this guy. They're parked in a far off secluded area and they have nothing but time and opportunity. So that's what they're doing. So they're talking and Phoenix ends up knocking him over his head and throwing a thing around him and strangling him and killing him that way in the car. This is what Malik has signed up fathership for. He's allowing this to happen to hopefully get it all out of his son's system for once. And after it's done, they drop the body off somewhere, and Malik ends up, Malik sends his body to a shop. He gets a new one. He has money. Why not? So after all this, he basically realizes that this is not the end. Phoenix still has this inside of him, and Malik is looking for other ways to sort of take care of this appetite that Phoenix has growing inside of him. So he's online looking for other sex offenders. And he basically ends up finding another one that's in the area. And he follows him online and figures out this guy's a camper. And he goes to a certain area regularly, a scheduled time. And so he sets up a camping trip for him and his son, father-son time, to where hopefully his son can go get this completely out of his system once and for all. So they end up going on their camping trip, tents, everything, all the equipment. And when they get there, Malik is like, we need to go find this guy and follow him to figure out his pattern, you know. That way we can figure out the quickest, easiest way to kill him. And so they go into the woods and they're looking for this guy. And ultimately, Malik ends up grabbing that thing around his son's neck and he chokes him out. He kills his son right there because he's realized that he cannot save his son. There's no stopping this murdering appetite that's going on inside of him. And furthermore, he can't live with knowing what he's done. So immediately after he kills his son, he slits his wrist and he's lying there waiting for his life to leave his body. He's sorry to his wife and his daughter for leaving them, but he can't allow his son to go around killing people, and he can't live without him either. So basically, as he's starting to fade out, basically, he sees his son. And his son is standing there and he's like, I waited for you, Dad. And he's like, really? Where are we at? And he's like, we're in between death and where we're going to. And he grabs his father's hand and they start walking off. And he's like, look, see. And he turns around and sees both of their bodies dead, lying there. And basically, that's the end of it. The book was really well written. I'm not sure that I hit everything the way that I need to. It's a very good read. I highly recommend it, even though I spoiled everything for you. I hope you liked it. If you like my video, please hit the like button. Become a subscriber. Thanks for watching.